worked on the Rodney King case. I worked on the Reginald Denny case. I worked on a bunch
What?
of SIS and dog bite cases.
Oh my God.
And it's kind of like, honestly, the joke is that I'm tactical Forrest Gump. I have ended up in the right place with the right people, and the business started to grow, and I got out of law school and was kind of at that point where I'm either going to continue to do the business or practice law. I passed the bar and get my license, and then I quickly realized that law enforcement litigation is insurance. Outside of a privately insured context, it's like the city of Los Angeles is self-insured. We fought everything that we thought we were correct on. Outside of that, when private litigation occurs, it's an insurance company that makes the decision. And that was not something that I really wanted to do because I'm a believer in law enforcement. And when somebody does the right thing, I really wanted to defend them. And you could see very easily how these cases were getting settled, and dirtbags that were shooting cops were getting, $1 million to make the lawsuit go away. And so then we started doing military stuff, and the business grew. And so I made the decision to maintain my license, but run Aardvark. And, now 30 some odd years later, it's been almost 4 decades I've been doing this because I'm 55 now. It was the right decision. I've had an amazingly blessed career, and have worked with some of the top units in the world, and now have an opportunity to give back both through my job and through the podcast. So it's fantastic.
Okay, so you opened up a rabbit hole with saying that you were there for the litigation of Rodney King. So these younger officers out there, I've asked cops, new cops, discussing body cameras and in-car cameras and stuff like that. And I'll ask them, I'm like, well, you know what started this all, right? And they're like, no, what? And I'm like, they think Michael Brown,
Yeah,
which is actually true for body cameras, but
sure.
they were a thing, but they weren't a thing, and then they were mandated, which I think was a great thing. But uh, Rodney King, they don't know shit about Rodney King, and you were there for the litigation. What was the environment like at that time?
It was ugly because it was the first case that really caught media attention for a use of force. And it was poorly filmed, but it was filmed. It was ugly. I mean, it was a very ineffective arrest. Um, and it's interesting because if you watch the Rodney King video, and I watched it a lot, especially working on the case. Initially, they're trying to subdue Rodney. It's very clear at some point it transitions to trying to educate Rodney,
Yeah.
which obviously constitutionally is very problematic, right? It's not law enforcement's role to punish. It's law enforcement's role to enforce the law and arrest, and it's the judiciary's job to punish. And so you watch that video, and there's a lot of things now looking at it with a more modern eye that you would see that weren't really seen at the time. But it's an ugly video. Fortunately, Rodney was not that badly injured. I mean, that could have very easily ended in him dying. But retrospectively, that was one of those moments for law enforcement where the future of law enforcement took an inflection,
Yes.
and it changed the way. And the thing is,
Yeah.
law enforcement, the evolution of law enforcement, at least during my career, there's a gradual progressive building of kind of social conscience and social thought, but there is a catalytic event that changes the public's perception of whether it be a tactic or equipment, and it can be both positive and negative, right? Like the North Hollywood bank robbery was a positive thing for law enforcement because people all of a sudden realized like cops were significantly outgunned,
Yeah.
and it gave kind of this social space for patrol rifles and for more advanced tactics and starting to look at active shooter and those kinds of things, which might not have been well received prior to that. But Rodney King was one of those moments where the credibility of law enforcement really came into question, and the application of force and the constitutionality of the application of force came into question. And I think that if 100 years from now, we look back and you go, okay, what was that moment? Rodney King was that moment where the public began to go, hey, wait a minute, like this is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was out of sight, out of mind before
Yeah,
the cultural policing. There were, the even bad guys had the mindset like, if I run from the cops, there's an ass whooping attached to it.
Oh yeah.
Back in that day, it's not like that now. Um, but like you say, it's kind of like the rise of the phoenix out of the ashes kind of thing. It was a tragedy. Like that shouldn't have happened. But at the time, if you were to talk to the police or talk to the public at the time, for the most part, if they just would have heard about that, they'd have been like, that then he shouldn't have, bad guys shouldn't be doing bad guy things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
but when you see it, that's a different story. And that's what started bringing the cameras around and getting into tactics and stuff like that. How police use force changed. And I think, like you said, it's this little slow snowball effect. Something bad happens, the public tells us what's going to be dictated from here on out, and we figure something out for them and go, is this good? And they're like, yep, we like that. That's good. Until you get down a few years later, now all these police cars have cameras in the cars, but why don't the cops have something on them? Look, it could have prevented the Michael Brown thing.